The night sky above the Kethera homeworld burned with falling ships and the orange glow of distant explosions. Commander HFY pressed his scaled hands against the communication console as another blast shook the underground command center. Dust fell from the ceiling while emergency lights flickered red across the faces of his remaining crew members. "Sir, we have lost contact with the northern defense grid," reported his aide, her voice barely steady. "The Vorthic forces have broken through Sector 7. HFY closed his eyes for a moment. 3 days ago, his people had been tending their crystal gardens and teaching their young ones about the peaceful ways of their ancestors. Now those same gardens were smoking craters and their children hid in deep shelters while death reigned. From the sky, the Vorthic Imperium had arrived without warning. Their massive black ships had dropped from hyperspace like hungry predators, immediately beginning their systematic destruction of everything the Kethera had built over thousands of years. No demands had been made, no negotiations offered. The aliens simply began killing everyone and everything they could find. "How long until the orbital platforms are gone?" HFY asked his tactical officer. "Less than 6 hours, sir." "Maybe 4. The commander looked around at his people. They had fought bravely, but their defensive fleet had been destroyed in the first hour of combat. Their planetary shields had lasted another day before the Vorthic weapons finally punched through them. Now all that remained were scattered resistance. Groups and a few underground facilities like this one. "Open all communication channels," HFY ordered. "All frequencies, all ranges. Emergency power to the transmitters." His communications officer looked confused. "Sir, who are we trying to reach?" "All nearby systems have already fallen to the Imperium or abandoned this sector." "Anyone," HFY replied. "Everyone. Send out the universal distress signal and keep BROADCAST until the power fails." The officer nodded and began working at his console. Within minutes, a desperate message began streaming out from the dying world. Carried by subspace waves that would travel faster than light to every corner of the galaxy where someone might be listening. Meanwhile, on a small blue planet countless light years away, Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison sat in the quiet communication center of Terran Defense Command. The night shift was usually peaceful, with only routine traffic between Earth's orbital stations and the handful of colony ships that had recently departed for nearby. Star Systems. Jake sipped his coffee and watched the endless stream of data flowing across his monitors. Earth had only achieved faster than light travel 5 years ago, and humanity was still taking its first careful steps into the galaxy. Most nights, the communication center received nothing more interesting than weather reports from the Mars colonies that changed at exactly 0347 hours. When every alarm in the facility began screaming at once, Jake nearly dropped his coffee as red warnings flashed across every screen. The computer system struggled to process an incoming signal that was unlike anything in their databases. The transmission was clearly artificial, clearly intelligent, but it was coming from a star system that Earth's astronomers had never even cataloged properly. "Computer, run translation protocols," Jake commanded as he called up his supervisor. "Translation protocols initiated," the computer replied in its calm voice. "Warning, source language unknown, attempting pattern recognition." Within minutes, Admiral Susan Blake arrived in the communication center. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent her entire career preparing Earth's defenses for the possibility that humanity might not be alone in the universe. Now it seemed that preparation was about to be tested. "What do we have, Jake?" she asked, studying the displays. "Unknown signal from grid reference 127.4 by 89.2, approximately 47 light-years from Earth," Jake reported. "The computer says it's definitely an artificial transmission, but the language is completely alien." Admiral Blake frowned as she watched the translation software work. Slowly, words began appearing on the screen, rough and incomplete, but clearly carrying an urgent message. "Help, dying. World burning, VORTAK, please, The partial translation sent a chill through the room. Even With most of the message still scrambled, the meaning was horrifyingly clear. Somewhere out there, an entire civilization was being destroyed, and they were begging anyone who could hear them for help. "How reliable is this translation?" Admiral Blake asked. "The emotional content is unmistakable," Jake replied. "The computer is picking up stress patterns, fear indicators, and desperation markers that are consistent across most known communication methods. Whoever sent this is terrified and running out of time." Admiral Blake stared at the screen for a long moment. Earth's small fleet consisted of only 12 interstellar-capable warships, designed more for exploration and defense than actual combat. They had never encountered hostile aliens, never fought a space battle, and had no idea what they might be facing in a distant star system. "Ma'am," Jake said quietly, "there's something else. The signal is getting weaker. I think whoever is sending it won't be able to keep transmitting much longer." The Admiral walked to the large window that looked out over Earth's orbital shipyards. She could see the lights of the TDS Valiant, the flagship of humanity's small but growing space fleet. Captain Ryan Davis and his crew were probably sleeping peacefully, unaware that they might soon be called upon to fight humanity's first interstellar war. "Jake, I want you to patch me through to Fleet Command immediately," Admiral Blake ordered. "Then get me Captain Davis aboard the Valiant and Captain Lisa Ford on the Thunder. If we're going to do this, we're going to need every ship we have." "Ma'am, are you saying we're actually going to respond to this signal?" Admiral Blake turned back to face the communication officer. Her expression was grim but determined. "Lieutenant Commander, 300 years ago, my ancestors received a distress call from a sinking ship in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They could have ignored it, could have said it wasn't their problem, could have decided it was too dangerous to help. Instead, they turned their ship around and sailed through a storm to rescue complete strangers. It's what humans do." She gestured toward the alien message still scrolling across the screens. "Today, we received a distress call from a sinking civilization in the middle of space. And we're going to do exactly what humans have always done when someone needs help and no one else is willing to provide it." Jake nodded and began placing the calls that would awaken Earth's fleet commanders and set in motion humanity's first journey to war among the stars. The 12 ships of Earth's hastily assembled war fleet hung in space like gleaming metal daggers against the starfield. Captain Ryan Davis stood on the bridge of the TDS Valiant, watching through the main view screen as the last of his ships finished their final preparations for the jump to hyperspace. The past 18 hours had been a whirlwind of activity. Admiral Blake's orders had reached every Earth fleet facility simultaneously, and within 6 hours every available warship had been loaded with supplies, ammunition, and crew members who volunteered without hesitation for a mission they knew almost nothing about. "Captain, all ships report ready for hyperspace transit," announced Lieutenant Commander Alex Turner from the tactical station. "Course is laid in for the Kethra system." Davis nodded and opened a communication channel to the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Davis aboard the Valiant. In 30 seconds, we will make the jump to hyperspace and begin humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. We don't know what we'll find when we arrive, but we know why we're going. Someone out there needs help, and we're going to provide it. That's what Earth Fleet does." He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. These were good people, trained professionals who had signed up to defend Earth and explore the galaxy. None of them had expected to be flying into combat against unknown aliens when they woke up yesterday morning. "All ships jump in 3, 2, 1, execute." The stars stretched into lines of light as the human fleet entered hyperspace, beginning the 3-day journey to a star system none of them had ever heard of until yesterday. Behind them, Earth grew smaller and disappeared, while ahead lay the unknown dangers of their first contact with hostile alien life aboard the heavy cruiser. Thunder, Captain Lisa Ford gathered her senior officers in the briefing room. She was a compact woman with short brown hair and intense green eyes, known throughout the fleet for her aggressive tactics and unwavering determination. "People, we have 3 days to figure out how to fight aliens," she announced without preamble. Chief Martinez has been analyzing the Kethra transmissions, and what she's found isn't encouraging. Dr. Helen Martinez, the fleet's chief science officer, activated the holographic display in the center of the table. Images appeared showing rough translations of alien text and tactical symbols that the computer had managed to decode. The Vorthek. Imperium appears to be a massive military civilization that has been expanding across this region of the galaxy for several hundred years, Martinez explained. From what I can determine from the Kethra data, they follow a pattern of complete conquest. They don't negotiate, they don't take prisoners, and they don't leave survivors. She manipulated the display, showing a map of local star systems. Based on the signal strength and transmission logs, I believe they've already conquered at least 15 systems in this sector alone. The Kethra homeworld appears to be their latest target. Commander Sam Walker, captain of the destroyer Storm, leaned forward in his chair. Doctor, do we have any information about their technology level? Their ships, weapons, defensive capabilities? Martinez shook her head. Very little. The Kethra transmissions mention weapons that can crack planetary shields and ships larger than anything in our fleet, but the technical details are either too damaged to translate or beyond our current understanding. Captain Ford studied the tactical display. So we're flying blind into a system where unknown aliens with superior technology are in the process of exterminating an entire civilization. That's correct, Martinez replied. Good, Ford said with a grim smile. I was worried this was going to be too easy. The journey through hyperspace passed quickly for some and slowly for others. In the engine rooms of all 12 ships, human engineers worked around the clock to squeeze every bit of performance from their fusion drives and weapon systems. They had no idea what they would face when they dropped back into normal space, but they were determined to be ready for anything. Chief Engineer Maria Santos aboard the Valiant spent most of her time developing contingency plans for combat damage. Human ships had been designed primarily for exploration and patrol duties, not sustained combat against superior forces. She knew that once the shooting started, her ability to keep the ship running might mean the difference between victory and death for everyone aboard. Meanwhile, in the communication centers of every ship, human technicians worked to decode more of the alien transmissions. The Kethra distress signal had grown weaker during the second day of travel, and by the third day, it had faded to almost nothing. Whatever was happening in that distant star system, time was running out. On the final day of the journey, Captain Davis called a fleet-wide conference. The holographic images of 11 other ship captains appeared around the briefing table aboard the Valiant, their faces showing the tension they all felt. In 6 hours, we drop out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethra system, Davis announced. Based on Dr. Martinez's analysis, we should expect to find active combat in progress and hostile forces that significantly outnumber us. Captain Pete Jackson of the frigate Liberty raised his hand. Captain, what are our rules of engagement? Do we have any restrictions on weapon use or target selection? Davis looked around at the assembled captains. Admiral Blake's orders were clear. We are authorized to use any and all necessary force to stop the genocide in progress and protect any surviving Kethra civilians. If the Vorthek want the fight, we'll give them one they'll remember. And if we're outgunned? Asked Captain Carol Bennett of the Destroyer Ranger. Then we get creative, Davis replied. Human beings didn't climb to the top of Earth's food chain by having the biggest teeth or the strongest claws. We got there by being smarter, faster, and more stubborn than anything else that wanted to kill us. Today we find out if those same qualities work in space. The final hours passed in tense silence as the human fleet prepared for combat. Weapon systems were charged and tested, armor plating was sealed and reinforced, and every crew member double-checked their emergency gear. Most of these people had never been in a real fight, let alone a space battle against unknown aliens. Finally, the moment arrived. Throughout the human fleet, navigation computers began their countdown sequences as the ships prepared to drop out of hyperspace at the edge of an alien star system where death and destruction waited for them. All ships, this is Captain Davis. came the voice over the communication channels. In 30 seconds, we find out what we're really made of. Remember, we came here to save lives and stop a genocide. Whatever we find out there, that mission comes first. The countdown reached 0, and 12 human warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethera system. What they saw there would haunt their dreams for the rest of their lives and inspire songs that would be sung across the galaxy for centuries to come. The sight that greeted the human fleet as they dropped out of hyperspace was beyond anything their worst nightmares had prepared them for. The Kethera homeworld, which should have been a blue-green jewel shining in the light of its sun, was instead a burning orange ball wrapped in clouds of smoke and debris. Massive alien ships, each one easily 10 times the size of the largest human vessel, circled the dying planet like vultures. Their hulls were black as space itself, and they bristled with weapon emplacements that glowed with malevolent energy. Even from the edge of the system, the human sensors could detect the ongoing bombardment as these monsters continued to rain destruction on anything that still moved on the planet's surface. "My God," whispered Lieutenant Commander Turner from his position at the tactical station aboard the Valiant. "Captain, I'm reading over 50 Vorthek vessels in this system. The smallest one is twice the size of our flagship." Captain Davis stared at the tactical display, his face grim. The enemy fleet was arranged in a loose formation around the planet, with the largest ships maintaining bombardment positions while smaller vessels patrolled the outer system. It was a textbook extinction operation, designed to ensure that no living thing escaped the systematic destruction. "Captain, I'm picking up movement in the outer asteroid belt," reported the sensor officer. "Multiple small contacts, heading away from the planet at high speed." Davis enhanced the display and felt his heart jump. 3 small ships, clearly of Kethera design, were fleeing through the asteroid field toward the edge of the system. They were badly damaged, moving slowly, and behind them came 4 Vorthek interceptors, closing fast with obvious hostile intent. "Those are civilian evacuation ships," Dr. Martinez announced from her station. "The energy signatures match the peaceful configurations we detected in the original transmissions." Davis watched as the pursuing Vorthek ships fired their weapons, missing the fleeing civilians but coming closer with each shot. In less than 10 minutes, those innocent people would be dead, and the last survivors of an entire civilization would be gone forever. "All ships, this is Captain Davis," he announced over the fleet communication channel. "We have Kethera civilian vessels under attack by Vorthek interceptors. We're going in to provide assistance. Form up on the Valiant and prepare for combat." "Captain," Turner said quietly, "we're outnumbered 50 to 12. If we engage, the entire Vorthek fleet will come after us." Davis looked at his tactical officer and smiled grimly. "Commander, my grandfather used to tell me that the size of the fight in the dog matters more than the size of the dog in the fight. Today we find out if he was right." The human fleet broke formation and streaked toward the fleeing Kethera ships at maximum velocity. Their smaller size and advanced human engineering gave them a significant speed advantage over the massive Vorthek vessels, and they covered the distance to the asteroid belt in minutes. The Vorthek interceptors detected the approaching human ships but seemed confused by their appearance. According to their databases, no other spacefaring species existed in this region of the galaxy. These unknown vessels were too small to be a serious threat, probably just another primitive species that would be easily destroyed. That assumption proved to be a fatal mistake. Captain Lisa Ford aboard the Thunder led the charge, her ship's experimental railguns charging with power that made the hull vibrate. Unlike the energy weapons that most galactic civilizations used, human railguns fired solid projectiles at incredible velocities, creating kinetic impacts that could punch through almost any known defensive system. "Target the lead interceptor," Ford ordered her weapons officer. "Full spread, maximum velocity." The Thunder's railguns fired in sequence, launching tungsten projectiles at nearly 10% of light speed. The Vorthek interceptor's shields, designed to deflect energy beams, were completely useless against solid matter moving at relativistic speeds. The projectiles punched through the alien ship's hull like bullets through paper, and secondary explosions tore the vessel apart from the inside. The remaining 3 Vorthic interceptors suddenly found themselves facing an enemy, unlike anything they had encountered before. These human ships moved with impossible agility, weaving through asteroid fields and debris clouds while maintaining accurate fire on their targets. Lieutenant Commander Sam Walker, commanding the destroyer storm, performed a maneuver that would become legendary in human naval history. His ship dove beneath a large asteroid, used its gravitational field to slingshot around the rock's far side, and emerged directly behind the second Vorthak interceptor with all weapons firing. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and the 2 remaining interceptors began broadcasting urgent distress calls to their main fleet. Those calls were answered immediately. Throughout the Kethera system, massive Vorthak vessels began turning away from their bombardment positions and accelerating toward the asteroid belt, where these unknown ships had dared to interfere with Imperial operations. War Prime Graxeth, commander of the Vorthik Imperial Fleet, studied the tactical displays from his flagship's command center. For 3 centuries, he had led the expansion of the Imperium across this region of the galaxy, and no species had ever successfully challenged his forces. These new ships were small and primitive, clearly using projectile weapons instead of proper energy systems, but they had destroyed 2 of his interceptors in less than 5 minutes. Analysis, he commanded his tactical staff. Unknown species, Lord Commander, replied his aide. 12 vessels, primitive construction, no match for our firepower. They appeared to be defending the Kethera survivors. Graxeth's eyes narrowed. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever intervened to protect another. The concept was alien to Vorthic thinking, where only strength mattered and the weak deserved extinction. Signal the fleet, he ordered. All vessels converge on grid reference 847.2. I want these unknown ships destroyed immediately. Aboard the Valiant, Captain Davis watched as the massive Vorthak fleet began moving toward his position. Energy readings from the alien ships were off the charts, and his tactical officer estimated that even the smallest enemy vessel could probably destroy any human ship with a single direct hit. Captain, we need to get those Kethera civilians out of here, Turner reported. But the Vorthik fleet will be in weapons range in less than 15 minutes. Davis looked at the tactical display, calculating distances and velocities. The Kethera evacuation ships were badly damaged and couldn't move fast enough to escape the system before the Vorthik arrived. His own fleet was fast and maneuverable, but they were about to face an enemy with overwhelming firepower advantages. All ships. This is Captain Davis, he announced. The Vorthak main fleet is moving to engage us. We're going to buy time for the Kethera civilians to escape, and then we're going to show these aliens what happens when they pick a fight with humans. He paused, looking around at his bridge crew. Every face showed determination mixed with fear, but none of them suggested retreat. Today, we make first contact with hostile alien life, Davis continued. Let's make sure it's a contact they remember. The first energy beams from the Vorthak fleet began lancing through space toward the human ships, and humanity's first interstellar war had officially begun. The battle for the lightning became the turning point that would reshape galactic history. The human fleet formed a defensive sphere around their damaged companion, with each ship taking turns to absorb enemy fire while the others struck back. With coordinated precision, War Prime Graxeth watched from his flagship as his 2 cruisers approached what should have been an easy kill, only to find themselves facing the concentrated firepower of the entire human fleet. Within minutes, both Vorthak vessels were crippled by railgun fire and forced to withdraw. This is impossible, Graxeth muttered, staring at the tactical display. No species protects their weak, no species sacrifices the many for the few. His aide looked equally confused. Lord Commander, their behavior violates all known patterns of civilized warfare. They are risking their entire fleet to save a single damaged vessel. Graxeth had conquered 47 star systems during his career, and in every case the defending Species had eventually abandoned their weak members to save themselves. It was the logical thing to do, the rational response to overwhelming force. These humans were behaving in a way that made no tactical sense, but the humans weren't thinking about tactical sense. They were thinking about Chief Petty Officer Don Murphy, who had 3 children back on Earth. They were thinking about Lieutenant Sarah Kim, who had joined the fleet to see the stars. They were thinking about every person aboard the Lightning, who had volunteered for this mission without hesitation. Captain Davis opened a communication channel to the Lightning. "Carol, how are your repairs coming?" "We've got partial engine power restored," Captain Bennett replied. "Give us another 10 minutes and we can maintain formation speed." "You've got it," Davis assured her. "Take all the time you need." The human fleet continued their defensive pattern, rotating positions so that no single ship bore the brunt of the Vorthok assault for too long. Their coordination was flawless, their timing perfect, and their determination absolute. Dr. Martinez, still analyzing enemy communications from aboard the Thunder, made another crucial discovery. "Captain Ford, I'm intercepting Vorthok tactical transmissions. They're confused by our behavior patterns and requesting guidance from their command structure." Ford smiled grimly. "Confused is good. Confused enemies make mistakes." She was right. The Vorthok fleet, trained for centuries in conventional warfare against conventional opponents, began making tactical errors as they struggled to understand human military doctrine. Ships moved out of position, fired at targets that were no longer there, and failed to coordinate their attacks effectively. Meanwhile, Chief Engineer Santos aboard the Valiant was implementing a plan that would have seemed insane to any rational person. "Captain, I've been analyzing our power core specifications," she reported. "If we overload the fusion reactors and eject them at precisely the right moment, we can create electromagnetic pulses that will disable nearby enemy ships." Davis looked at her with concern. "Maria, overloading our power cores sounds like a good way to destroy our own ships." "Not if we do it right," Santos replied. "We eject the cores just before they reach critical mass, then detonate them near enemy vessels. The electromagnetic pulse will knock out their systems without destroying the ships entirely." It was a desperate plan, but desperate times called for innovative solutions. Davis approved the procedure, and within minutes every ship in the human fleet was preparing to turn their power cores into improvised weapons. The first test came when 3 Vorthok destroyers attempted to flank the human formation. Captain Pete Jackson aboard the frigate Liberty ejected his overloaded power core directly into their path, then triggered the detonation at precisely the right moment. The electromagnetic pulse that followed knocked out all 3 enemy ships simultaneously, leaving them drifting helplessly in space while their crews struggled to restart their systems. It was a stunning success that gave the human fleet a significant advantage, but the battle's climax was still to come. War Prime Graxith, frustrated by his fleet's inability to destroy these impossible humans, decided to end the engagement personally. His massive flagship, larger than the entire human fleet combined, began moving toward the battle zone with all weapons charging. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Vorthok command ship," reported Turner from his tactical station. "Whatever they're planning, it's going to be big." Davis studied the approaching flagship and realized that conventional tactics wouldn't work against something that massive. The ship's shields were too powerful, its weapons too devastating, and its armor too thick for normal attacks to be effective. That was when he made the decision that would make him a legend. "All ships, this is Captain Davis," he announced. "The Valiant is going to make a close approach to the enemy flagship. I need everyone else to continue protecting the civilians and watch for my signal." "Captain, that's suicide," Turner protested. "Their weapons will destroy us before we get within 10,000 kilometers." Davis smiled and activated the ship's maximum acceleration. "Commander, my grandfather taught me that sometimes you have to get close enough to see the whites of their eyes." The Valiant streaked toward the massive Vorthok flagship, weaving through energy beams that could have destroyed her with a single hit. As the ship closed the distance, Davis prepared for the most dangerous boarding action in human history. But instead of attempting to board the enemy vessel, He did something that War Prime Graxith never saw coming. At the last possible moment, Davis brought the Valiant alongside the flagship's communication array and used the ship's computer systems to directly access the Vorthek data networks within seconds. The human fleet was downloading tactical information about the entire Vorthek Imperium. Fleet positions, weapon specifications, conquered systems, and most importantly, records of every species that had been destroyed or enslaved over the past 3 centuries. "Got it," announced Dr. Martinez as the data transfer completed. "Captain, we have everything, their entire military database." Davis pulled the Valiant away from the flagship just as its weapons began tracking their position. The ship took several hits that knocked out non-essential systems, but she remained intact and operational. As the human fleet began its fighting withdrawal from their Kethera system, they left behind a Vorthak fleet that was damaged, demoralized, and completely confused by what they had just experienced. For the first time in centuries, the Imperium had been challenged by an opponent who refused to follow the established rules of galactic warfare. More importantly, the 3 Kethera civilian ships had escaped to safety, carrying with them the last survivors of their species and the grateful knowledge that someone in the galaxy was willing to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The journey back to Earth took 3 days, during which Dr. Martinez worked around the clock to analyze the captured Vorthak data. What she found confirmed humanity's worst fears and greatest hopes simultaneously. The Vorthak Imperium controlled over 2,000 star systems and had enslaved or destroyed hundreds of species. But scattered throughout their records were references to resistance movements, hidden colonies, and survivors who had been waiting for someone to challenge the seemingly invincible conquerors. Admiral Blake's final log entry, recorded as the fleet approached Earth, would be quoted in history books for centuries to come. "Today we learn that we are not alone in the universe. We also learn that the universe has been waiting for someone crazy enough to pick a fight with bullies who seemed unbeatable. Apparently that someone is us." Within 6 months, the first ships of the Galactic Liberation Alliance would launch from Earth's orbital shipyards. Species after species, inspired by humanity's example and armed with captured Vorthak intelligence, would begin the largest rebellion in galactic history. The cry for help that had echoed across the stars had been answered, and humanity's response would echo even louder, carrying a simple message to every corner of the galaxy: Earth protects those who cannot protect themselves, and the age of Vorthak tyranny was finally coming to an end. The first Vorthak energy beams missed their targets by hundreds of kilometers, but the sheer power of the weapons was terrifying to behold. Where the beams passed through space, they left glowing trails of superheated particles that would have vaporized any human ship instantly. Captain Davis watched the tactical display as more Vorthak vessels joined the engagement, their massive forms closing the distance with methodical precision. The alien fleet clearly expected this to be a brief and one-sided battle against primitive opponents, who would be quickly destroyed. That expectation lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds. The human fleet scattered like a school of fish avoiding a shark, but instead of fleeing, they began implementing tactics that no galactic civilization had ever seen before. Captain Ford aboard the Thunder led her ship into the debris field of a destroyed Kethera orbital station, using the wreckage to mask her approach while her railguns charged for another devastating salvo. "Target acquired," announced her weapons officer. "Vorthak heavy cruiser, range 14,000 kilometers. Fire all weapons," Ford ordered. The Thunder's railguns spoke again, sending solid projectiles screaming through space at velocities that made them nearly impossible to track. The Vorthak cruiser's shields flared and collapsed under the kinetic impact, and secondary explosions rippled along its hull as internal systems failed, but the aliens learned quickly. The damaged cruiser immediately began broadcasting technical data about these new weapons to the rest of the fleet, and within minutes, the Vorthak ships were adjusting their defensive systems to account for projectile weapons. "Captain, they're adapting their shields," reported Chief Engineer Maria Santos aboard the Valiant. "The next salvo won't be as effective," Davis nodded grimly. He had expected the aliens to be intelligent opponents, and their quick adaptation proved it. But humans had advantages that went beyond advanced weapons technology. "All ships switch to pattern Gamma," he ordered. "Time to show them how Earth pilots really fight." What followed was unlike anything the Vorthak had encountered in 3 centuries of galactic conquest. The human ships began moving in coordinated attack patterns that used their superior speed and maneuverability to maximum advantage. They darted between asteroids, used gravity wells to slingshot around debris, and coordinated their attacks with split-second timing that confused the alien targeting systems. Lieutenant Commander Walker aboard the Storm led a 3-ship formation in a daring assault on the Vorthak command vessel's sensor arrays. His ships approached from 3 different angles simultaneously, forcing the alien gunners to split their fire and reducing the effectiveness of their defensive systems. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy that ship," Walker announced to his formation. "We just need to blind it." The human ships opened fire on the massive alien vessel's external sensor clusters, using precise targeting to disable the equipment without triggering the ship's main defensive systems. Within minutes, the Vorthak flagship found itself partially blind, unable to coordinate the movements of its fleet as effectively. Meanwhile, Dr. Martinez aboard the Thunder made a discovery that would change the course of the battle. While analyzing the energy signatures from the Vorthak shields, she noticed a pattern that repeated every 47 seconds. "Captain Ford, I'm detecting a systematic fluctuation in their defensive systems," she reported. "Their shields operate on a rotating frequency cycle, probably to prevent overload from sustained fire." Ford understood immediately. "How long do we have when the cycle resets?" "Approximately 2.3 seconds every 47 seconds, Martinez replied. "But the timing has to be perfect." Ford opened a communication channel to the entire human fleet. "All ships, this is Captain Ford. I'm transmitting shield frequency data to your tactical computers. We have a 2-second window every 47 seconds when their defenses are vulnerable." Captain Davis received the data and immediately began calculating attack patterns. If the human fleet could coordinate their attacks to hit during those brief vulnerable moments, they might be able to inflict serious damage on ships that were otherwise nearly invulnerable. "All ships prepare for synchronized assault," Davis ordered. "Target selection is at individual captain's discretion, but timing must be precise." The next phase of the battle became a deadly dance of timing and precision. The human ships positioned themselves around their targets, waiting for the crucial moment when the alien shields would be vulnerable. When that moment came, 12 ships fired simultaneously, sending concentrated firepower at specific points on the Vorthak vessels. The results were devastating. 3 alien ships suffered critical damage in the first coordinated strike, and 2 more were crippled in the second. The Vorthak fleet, which had expected to easily destroy these primitive opponents, suddenly found itself taking serious casualties from an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. War. Prime Graxith stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His fleet had been reduced from 54 vessels to 47 in less than 20 minutes, and the unknown enemy showed no signs of retreating. These aliens fought with a combination of technological innovation and tactical creativity that was unlike anything in Imperial experience. "Lord Commander, we're receiving damage reports from 7 more vessels," his aide reported. "The enemy appears to have developed countermeasures for our defensive systems." Graxith's jaw tightened with rage. The Vorthak Imperium had conquered half the galaxy by demonstrating overwhelming superiority over every species they encountered. The idea that these primitive aliens could effectively fight back was intolerable. "Signal all vessels," he commanded. "Abandon formation protocols. All ships are authorized to engage independently with maximum firepower." The order changed the nature of the battle immediately. Instead of maintaining their disciplined formation, the Vorthak ships began attacking with reckless aggression, pouring massive amounts of energy into space in an attempt to overwhelm the human vessels through sheer firepower. Captain Davis watched as the space around his fleet lit up with deadly energy beams. Several of his ships took glancing hits that damaged their hulls and knocked out secondary systems, but the human pilots continued to weave through the firestorm with skill that bordered on miraculous. "Captain, the destroyer Lightning reports." "Engine damage," Turner announced. "They're falling behind the formation." Davis looked at the tactical display and saw that the Lightning was indeed slowing down, black smoke trailing from her damaged engines. Two Vorthic cruisers had noticed her vulnerability and were moving to finish her off. "Captain Bennett, this is Davis," he called to the Lightning's commander. "Can you maintain formation?" "Negative, Valiant," came the reply from Captain Carroll. "Bennett, we're down to 60% power and losing attitude control." Davis made a decision that would echo through military history. Instead of ordering the Lightning to retreat or abandoning her to save the rest of the fleet, he did something that no Vorthic commander would have ever considered. "All ships, converge on the Lightning's position," he ordered. "We're not leaving anyone behind." The entire human fleet immediately changed course, moving to form a protective formation around their damaged comrade. The Vorthic cruisers found themselves facing not one crippled ship, but 12 determined opponents who were willing to risk everything to protect their wounded companion. The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned what human loyalty really meant.